From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine on Tuesday night. I am Ben Hall. Good show tonight. We are talking about the plan to defeat ISIS, this incredibly evil group that has emerged in the Middle East. I want to get a sense of what this group is, where it came from, what it's doing, and the politics of it all as well. Of course, we invite you to call in. We're very happy to have with us Thomas Schwartz, Vanderbilt University history professor. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to show something here from CBS News in a moment just to get us up to date on the latest of what's going on. And there's a lot new going on. But just how serious is this situation? We'll talk about the political a little later, just in general. When you look at what's going on in the Middle East, how serious is this to the United States?
Well, I think it's a very serious problem to the United States that in the middle of the Middle East, in the countries of Iraq and Syria, you've had arisen one of the most wealthy and potentially powerful terrorist states. I mean, ISIS has resources, particularly through oil, its control of oil resources and the rest, which allow it or give it the capacity to cause and to inflict terrorism in Western Europe, in the United States. How strong, how serious the threat is still uncertain, but it certainly has a potential threat. Now you have a serious terrorist state in the middle of one of the most important regions of the world.
And it is advancing, right? I mean, they are taking over territory.
They are taking territory. They took an additional Iraqi town today. They have continued to advance. Air power has not stopped them yet.
So I wanted to, Susan McGinnis filed this report with CBS News. This is basically the latest on what is going on with ISIS in the Middle East. Let's take a look at that.
As the U.S.-led bombing campaign against Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria continues, Air Force officials say the group is adjusting its strategy.
They're now dispersing themselves to allow themselves situations to be more survivable, if you will, which requires us to work harder to locate them.
Coalition forces are hitting ISIS headquarters and logistics hubs. Syria's foreign minister says the country welcomes the operation.
As long as they are aiming ISIS location in Syria and in Iraq, we are satisfied.
Hadiya Yusuf, a regional leader, worries Americans might be hitting the wrong targets. We don't think they're the right ones, she said. They're not effective. Some lawmakers here on Capitol Hill still argue ground troops may be needed to defeat ISIS. But President Obama says he will not send U.S. combat troops into the region.
Sending ground troops into a combat role sends a mixed signal to the Iraqi government in particular about what our expectations are.
As the battle ramps up, ISIS continues its propaganda campaign, releasing a third video of British journalist John Cantley. In it, the hostage, possibly reading from a script, criticizes U.S. airstrikes. Susan McGinnis, CBS News, Washington.
It's chilling to see those videos involving the hostages. Mm-hmm. Have we underestimated the strength of ISIS? How many people comprise ISIS, and where did it come from, and have we underestimated them?
Well, I think we've underestimated them. I mean, the president the other day actually said, in effect, this was a failure of the intelligence community. ISIS, the actual numbers are very imprecise. We don't have the types of intelligence on ISIS that we should have. Some of the estimates put it at 20,000 fighters. It's really unclear. What they have done is they've rallied the forces that, in some senses, we had defeated in Iraq, the Sunni tribes that had been defeated in part by cooperation with other Sunni tribes and other leaders. They've rallied them. They've also taken advantage of the civil war in Syria, which has caused immense suffering among many of the Sunni tribes in Syria, and they've crafted together across the borders this large group, and then they've attracted fighters from abroad. They've attracted disillusioned, alienated Muslim youth from other countries, in Saudi Arabia, from Europe, and so they've gathered this collection together of fighters who are fanatic, radicalized, and willing to die in pursuit of their efforts.
And willing to be extremely brutal. Right. I mean, this is an incredibly brutal organization. And when you hear the battle fatigue from President Obama and from the administration saying, we don't want to do boots on the ground, and there is now this sense. I mean, what do you think? I mean, can we get this done? Can we stop them without boots on the ground? You heard in that story, are they bombing the appropriate targets? Is it effective? And here we are again. Do we send troops into Iraq and into the Middle East?
I think it's very questionable as whether ISIS can be completely defeated by air power. I think what's open to question, and I think what allows some hope that the president's strategy can work, is that it can be contained. Its momentum can be stopped. ISIS may be the type of organization that if it's not continuing to expand, it may fall in among themselves, and there may be divisions and rivalries within it. So if air power could stop and contain ISIS, there's a possibility that the strategy will work. I think this is in part the gamble the administration's making. It's also hoping that some of the Kurds who are good fighters and will defend their area, and that perhaps some of the Iraqi army that we train could also be brought into the battle. But there's a gamble here, and the administration is not necessarily laying out what it sees as the percentages. I think it's hoping now that it will be able to contain ISIS, but it's not really, I don't think it really thinks it can defeat it completely with this strategy.
Is there enough, I don't know, training, firepower, whatever, will on the part of the people, you know, that live there? You know, can they take care of this, or they need this international coalition? This is not going to be taken care of there.
It can't be taken care of there. I mean, that is, I think, not going to happen. What can happen is that the Kurds, for example, who are capable fighters and whom we've supplied and aided, can defend their territory. They're not going to march, though, into another area to do our bidding for them. They're not going to do that. That I think, if there's any illusions on that part, I think that's wrong. But what could happen is the Iraqi government could become more effective and perhaps be able to use its troops to regain some of its territory. But even there, that's a long-term proposition. That government is only now really being reshaped. Syria, of course, is the big variable. Syria is in complete shambles. What do we really expect to happen in Syria that could come from Syrian forces themselves? Assad's not going to send his forces in. He's going to let us do the dirty work for now. He's not going to try to battle ISIS. So in that sense, there's really an open question as to who is actually going to take charge and in some sense, try to be the boots on the ground.
At this point, who has the upper hand? I mean, at this point, are we seeing that these bombings are effective, or is ISIS growing? And how does ISIS grow? Is it as we bomb, do they recruit new people? And, you know, I guess that's my question. Are they continuing to expand or not? And what do you see there for the future? Well,
they have according to reports today, they did seize an additional town in Iraq. They're not expanding at the rapid rate they were during the summer, when the threat really came into the fore, and you had the massacres of the Yazidis, you had all the other things going on. So they're not expanding at that rapid rate. But they have not been defeated. They have not been shrunk in any real sense. There's not any great recapturing of territory from them. It's somewhat at a stalemate right now. Whether it could break through might depend on additional recruitments, what happens in Syria. So I think right now we're in a sort of stalemated situation in which air power may be allowing us to stop them, but not necessarily roll back their advance.
And politically now, you look at President Obama, his handling of it. Is this the most difficult time of his presidency? And specifically talking about ISIS, what to do here? How do you think he's handling it? And just where does this rank as far as difficult things?
Well, there's no question. I mean, he's had other foreign policy issues come up, and certainly we haven't forgotten about the Ukraine and the Crimean problems. There are other issues that could emerge as well. But I think this is one of the most difficult, and particularly because it hits at one of the core issues of his presidency. President Obama became president vowing to end the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Now he finds himself in a situation where he has to re-enter, at least in a limited fashion, war in the Middle East. And I think that's a very difficult thing for any political leader to have to do, especially one who stakes so much on ending the wars.
And is it, once you say boots on the ground, anything can happen. And so I guess the question I'm about to ask is somewhat naive, but could we commit a certain number of troops, and could they take care of this maybe ragtag group and be out of there? You know, and I guess history is replete with people that think this war is going to be over in 2 months.
Right.
But is it possible that if we went in and took care of this, that we could be out quickly, or do we just then open this whole new door?
Well, I think what your point that you're getting at is the fear that the president has, that he might be promised by the military that the campaign would go swiftly, but that it would end up being bogged down. And that's, of course, his criticism of what George Bush did in Iraq. I mean, the Iraq campaign, the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks of the Iraq campaign were brilliant. I mean, Saddam Hussein was deposed quickly, Iraq was taken out, and then, of course, the insurgency began. The United States found itself caught up in the civil war that broke out in Iraq. And I think that's the fear that the president has, is that that would happen again. His military advisors, though, I think are telling him that if you actually want to defeat ISIS, you will probably have to put troops on the ground in a serious way.
My last question before we go to break, and then we start taking calls. Politically, if you take polls and that kind of thing, you're right. I mean, he staked his campaign, his presidency on getting out of Iraq and Afghanistan. And here we are winding down his presidency. That would be quite a turnaround if he suddenly has to put troops in there. Where is the public on this? Would the public, when you look at the polls and the numbers and everything, would they support troops? Do they have the same troops on the ground? Do they have the same fatigue?
Well, I think this is where it would, in many ways, the public's as ambivalent as the president. The president would probably have to really invoke real presidential speeches, rhetoric, and the rest, and rally his base. He has support, interestingly enough. He has more support on the other side of the aisle. I mean, Paul Ryan was just on CNN saying, I'd support the president if he put boots on the ground. So he has support among Republicans for it. He'd have to rally his own supporters and have to tell them, as much as I have disliked the war in Iraq, this one is necessary, we have to do it, and I will promise you that it will be done quickly and we will get out. But that is a tough one for him.
That is a tough one. Okay, we are going to take a break. Then we're going to come back, start taking calls. If you're on the line, hold on. A couple lines open. If you want to call, there's the number, 737+, 737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.